We have come to the last chapter of the textbook, and that chapter is extremely easy to read. It doesn't have any complicated things going on. It's important to read it so you kind of like get, that's the bookend for this class, and we will be talking about it still in the online, during the online sections. So what we will be doing today is kind of like starting to draw these strings together and make some connections and talk about something that we haven't really talked much about before. Things that are related to the last chapter and other things as well. So this class has been about language change, and it has been about diachronic language change, which means that we have been looking at how English has developed across the centuries, across time, diachronic change. When we look at language variation at a cross section of a language, that would be the study of synchronic change. But this class has been about diachronic change in language, change across time, and like on this kind of an axis, and then synchronic change or synchronic variation. We can talk about change or variation in both cases. So diachronic variation happens across time. Synchronic variation happens at the same moment when we move from one group of people to another group of people, or one person moves from one speech situation to another speech situation. That would be synchronic variation and synchronic change of language, that these people speak this way and these people speak in another way. So the interesting connection between diachronic change and synchronic change is that, or synchronic variation, is that the seeds for diachronic change across time, are always in the here and now, in the present situation. In synchronic variation, we have the potential of change for language. Like I've mentioned earlier, that sometimes a quote-unquote cool group of people starts pronouncing things in a certain way, starts using a particular lexical item, and that spreads. So we have, at one time, we have this one group of people, like group one, and they use certain forms, certain pronunciations, certain morphological neologisms or what have you, and then it spreads from that group to group 2 and then to group 3 and so on. And of course this kind of a spread of a change is related to time. It happens across time. Yeah, good thinking, you can see here, there. So, so synchronic variation is connected to diachronic variation, variation across time. That, the Beowulf poet spoke a different kind of English than what Chaucer spoke, and then what Shakespeare spoke, and what we speak today. But the seeds for that type of diachronic variation were in the variation of what were going on at that particular time, point of time. Okay, so when language changes, it can change in all of its areas. And we have seen in this class that language indeed has changed quite a bit in how the words are pronounced, how the sounds are pronounced, in phonetics, the pronunciation of sounds. In phonology, like a quick example is this phonymization of the voiced fricatives. They existed in Old English, but they became phonemic, capable of changing meanings if used in a particular place in a word. That happened. So we now have phonemes, v, z, th, and they did not used to be phonemes, even they were phones in Old English. So phonology can change, the system of sounds can change, morphology can change, and all you need to do is to go back and look at the Old English tables of nouns and verbs and how they had all those inflectional endings which we have lost, most of which we have lost. Change in the pronunciations and the change in morphology, like, you know, if pronunciations change, like for instance what happened in starting from Germanic already, Proto-Germanic, the endings of the words became less audible, less salient, because the shift of the stress pattern going to the front of the word, to the first root syllable of the word. So that was a sound system related change. It led to the fact that the inflectional endings started to be, you know, deleted because they were not as salient anymore because the stress wasn't regularly there. So people were paying attention to the beginning of the words, and that led to morphological change. When inflectional endings disappear or are radically reduced, as they have been in the history of English, that leads to a syntactic change, because you now have to do something else to show who is doing what to whom, with what instrument, when, where, and why, because the endings don't give these grammatical or semantic roles of different groups of words anymore. So something else needs to take that job, and that's typically the word order. So English word order has become, even though in Old English it was already, there was the subject verb object pattern, but it could be varied in Old English because the inflections would say, okay, this is the object. So if I say something like chocolate I love, that's possible, but in Old English it would have been much more possible because chocolate would have had an inflectional marker showing that that's the direct object of my love. So, so these changes are interconnected, and that is the big picture from this class. You've learned a lot of details, but also try to keep this in mind. This is the forest, and the details that you have learned are the trees that make the forest, but this is important also to keep in mind. So these all areas of language change, and also lexicon changes. So words come and go. Some words stick and make their ways into you know, formally like into dictionaries, and they become everyday words. Every speaker of English would know them if that's what happens. But we have had a lot of words in English that have not stuck. So there was that one video that I posted where it was specifically about lexicon during early modern English times, when English acquired a lot of words from other languages, and also then you had the dictionary makers and grammarians who put these words, like Johnson, who made his big dictionary and introduced a lot of words, and some of them have disappeared. In everyone's lifetime, some words go out of use and other words come in. So, so lexicon changes. But I wanted to talk a little bit about semantic change that's change in the areas of meanings that we may have. May have a word that stays within us, so it's not, it doesn't become obsolete, but some meanings of that word may change, and some meanings may become obsolete, and new meanings may be added, and so on. Now, language semantic change has some patterns. So let's talk a little bit about the kinds of patterns. And I have posted this, again, it's already on Blackboard, so you don't need to copy this, or so you can just listen. So, we have one very common type of semantic change is amelioration, and that means that a word changes so that its meanings become somehow a little bit more glorified, nicer, better, goes into the positive emotional area. So, so what I have here is just, I have picked some random examples from different sources, and there hasn't been a lot about that actually in our particular textbook, so I wanted to introduce these to you because I think these are really interesting. So we have, in present day English, we have the word pretty, and it's a positive word. It has positive connotations. Everybody wants to be called pretty, right? Now, it comes from Old English pratti, and that wasn't as nice. It meant tricky or sly or wily. So it has changed. The meaning has ameliorated. The meaning has acquired like a more positive connotation, and actually not only a connotation but denotation also. That dictionary meaning that pretty is a positive. It's almost the same as beautiful, right? So another example would be the word scant, which in Old English meant sparingly or niggardly. That is just means the same as sparingly, like a little bit something. And scant, it was a more negative meaning than the meaning scant, which is just pretty neutral. Jolly is, I would say, that might be a better example of amelioration. Jolly is, nobody will get offended if you say, oh, you are in a jolly mood. But in Old English, it would mean arrogant mood or wanton or lustful even. So it has become ameliorated. So if you go to the Jolly Fox, Now you have the Old English meanings too. That it can be an arrogant or lustful fox. So bear is pretty neutral today. It has ameliorated. In Old English, it meant useless or worthless. Luxury is everything that we all want to have. I mean, is something that we all want to have. I would like to have a luxury car and a luxury apartment in New York or what have you. But in Old English, it meant lust, licentiousness. So that has ameliorated also. Today, luxury is a pretty good thing. Otherwise, they would not they would not advertise these luxury apartments and luxury cars if they were lust related. Okay. The word boy, common as it is, it's very neutral today. But in Old English, it meant rascal or servant or slave even. So quite a bit of a change there. Amelioration has happened. Yes.
Yes. I know in some like rural societies, or even older, in America, like calling somebody boy was like it was an insult. So
because it's
it denoted like you were lower in status than the person who was calling you boy. Boy, get over here or something.
Exactly, it's like talking to someone like talking to a servant,
yes.
And by extension like talking to a slave. Yes. So yeah, I had a student who was working at a restaurant as a server, and he just got so upset. Somebody called him, "Hey boy, come here," and that was the end of his working there, because he wouldn't be calling anyone. I mean, he wouldn't be called a boy. So yes.
What accounts for the change in the way we use the word pretty? Like, in the sense, like, that's a pretty big building, or that's pretty small, or pretty much. Like, how is it being used in phrases like that?
The pretty
Yes.
has become a qualifier. It's used in the same way as very. So that is an interesting change, just the change in the as a part of speech, because pretty is basically an adjective. And then if we say pretty small, pretty cool, it means the same thing as very. So it's started to be used as a qualifier, but it hasn't lost its adjectival meaning either. So we can still call a house pretty, or yeah. But a good observation. Very good. Thank you. So fond is a positive word today. In Old English it meant idiotic or mad. Prowl is nothing particularly bad, even though it still has some negative connotations, doesn't it? That, what are you prowling here for? But it had a stronger negative connotation, or meaning, actually, denotation in Old English: plunder or rob or get something by cheating. So it has ameliorated to an extent. I mean, there's this self-cleaning vacuum cleaner that is called a prowler, right? No? Or I think I've seen something like. Anyway, I'm not sure. But anyway, prowl is not like totally. It doesn't mean we wouldn't want to call a vacuum cleaner a prowler if it was the same as a robber. In present-day English, we have the word croon, which is like hum. It's not a common, very common word. Have you ever heard it used? Okay, good. So hum or sing softly. So it doesn't have bad connotations, but in Middle Dutch, where Old English got it, Old English or Middle English, don't quote me on that, it meant groan or lament, kronen. So amelioration is when the meanings of words become better. Sometimes, and very often, it's narrowing, it's connected with narrowing of meaning if earlier pejorative, the bad connotations, have been lost. And let's look at some examples of pejoration now. This is the opposite. So amelioration, meaning becomes nicer. Pejoration, meaning of a word becomes worse. So we have the word silly today, and it's, don't be silly. It has negative connotations. She's really silly. It's not very strong negative connotations, but it's still something you don't want to be. You don't want to be silly. You don't want to appear silly. But in Old English, it was Sally, and it meant happy or prosperous. So what we have here is pejoration of meaning. Interestingly, we looked at the lust and luxury changes, amelioration there. The opposite kind of thing happened with the word lewd. The word lewd in today's English is a pretty bad word. You don't want to be called lewd. You don't want to find yourself in the news with some lewd activities, right? But in Old English, it was just a neutral word for a lay person, a layman or laik. So lawede it had nothing to do with lewdness as today, but the word is the same. So lust today is somewhat negative, but in Old English it meant pleasure and delight. And you can see the connection there, but it has pejorated in meaning.
It's the same in German. Lust, it's not necessarily like sexual desire like in English. It's just like some kind of wanting or of like genuine pleasure, not necessarily negative.
Yes, exactly. So German has kept the older Germanic meaning that it's pleasure, something is pleasureful. Yes. In English, it just went down in meaning. So coy is also something that is that has pejorated, but in Old English it was just quiet and shy and modest. Carp is a bad way of talking, but in Old English it was just speech or talk. And knave, you don't want to call a young man a knave today because there are these negative connotations, right? But in Old English it just meant a boy or a page or servant, page, kind of a servant. So it didn't have the negative, it was a neutral word in Old English, but now knave is these knaves. It's kind of, it's, of course, it's not very common, but...
yeah, even in Shakespeare, I think, like, sometimes people in his plays will insult each other, like saying, "Oh, thou art a knave," or something.
Exactly. It had already pejorated by Shakespeare's time. Good. I like this example, the present-day English word fool. It comes from Latin follis, so this example doesn't come from Old English. But follis, these are, we don't use them anymore because we don't have live fires so often. But bellows, you make the fire alive, and those are bellows. So they are, in a way, they are wind bags. But there was this abstract process, abstractization process, that bellows became to mean windbag or airhead, and therefore in present-day English we get the word fool from the Latin follis, which meant just the household item like bellows. I don't have bellows in my house, but anyway. So amelioration and pejoration, words go either become more positive in meaning or more negative in meaning. Two other processes that may happen in language are strengthening and weakening, two opposite processes also. And a few examples. In present-day English, wreak havoc is a pretty strong expression, phrase, and we don't use wreak in many other phrases at all, but wreak havoc, that has stuck. But in Old English, reckon meant just avenge, punish, push, pronounce, and relate. So it has strengthened in meaning. Wreak havoc is a pretty strong term. So then we have gotten our words jeopardy, appalled, and drown from Old English terms that were not as strong in meaning. So jeopardy in Old English just meant uncertainty. Now if somebody is in jeopardy, that's like, you're almost close to death. But in Old English it was just uncertainty. Related, but has strengthened the meaning. Old English word appalled, equivalent for appalled, it was just pale or weakened, but appalled is a very strong term nowadays. Drown means that you go into the water and you die. But in Old English it was just drink or drench. So meaning has strengthened. The opposite examples of weakening of meaning. Meaning can weaken too. So the Old English word quellan was to kill or murder, But today, the word, English word, present-day English word quell doesn't mean that you kill someone. It's just kind of like suppress or quiet someone. So quellen has weakened. The next one is one of my favorite semantic changes because it tells something about the human condition. Soon, today, doesn't really mean immediately what it meant in Old English. So sauna meant immediately. I'll do it sauna, that's like right away. But if somebody tells you, oh, I'll take care of it soon, it can be next month or in a couple of months. So the meaning of soon has weakened. It's not immediately anymore. Spill comes from Old English spillen, which was destroy, kill, or lay waste. Much stronger in Old English. Dissolve in Old English meant cause the death of someone, but dissolve is much weaker now. Dreary is a bad thing, if the lesson is dreary, it's boring, or the day is dreary, it's kind of, drizzling rain and so on. But in Old English it was much stronger, it was gory, bloody, and cruel. So strengthening and weakening two types of semantic change. Generalization and extension and narrowing are a third pair of semantic change. In Old English, the word gesund meant safe, healthy, and uninjured. But in present-day English, the meaning of sund, which became sound, like a sound scolding, a sound sleep, a sound investment, a sound advice. Sound can be used with a bunch of different nouns to describe them, and that's been extension or generalization of meaning. Another example is, I don't know, we don't drink mead, or we don't have these mead-based fermented products so commonly used as during the Viking era. But in Indo-European, going even further back, the word medhu in Indo-European meant honey and mead, and today mead is just, like any fermented product, or can be. So that's not a really good example because how often do we use the term mead? But you know what it means. So it's not just honey. So it has kind of like, generalized in meaning. Narrowing can also happen. And just a couple of examples, the phrase widow's weeds. Do you know what widow's weeds are? I'm afraid that this word is dying in English. It means the clothes that a widow wears, black stockings and black dress and perhaps black veil. So widow's weeds, those habits, customs disappear. And I've been to American funerals and people don't wear black. But you go to a Finnish funeral, I guess we're more conservative people, pretty much always wear black stockings and so on. But anyway, widow's weeds are the weeds of the garment, the clothes of the widow. So, however, in Old English, the word wad, where weed comes from in this phrase, it meant just any kind of clothing. But now weed, it has narrowed, and it's dying. If you didn't know what it means, then it's dying. We can say goodbye to widow's weeds. Old English word weod, herbs and grass, came to mean weed in present-day English, and I mean in the plant sense that you pull off weeds from your rose bushes. But of course, it has had other kinds of developments. So, if you think of weed that you smoke, so that's been, in a way, generalization of meaning as well. But then we have also picked up the word grass, right, for the particular kind of object for smoking. But anyway, so here, if you think about the weed that we need to pull out of our garden, in Old English it was grass, herbs, not just the bad kinds of plants that find themselves in the wrong place, and that's why they are called weeds. Okay, swatan in Old English meant liquid or blood, but in present day English it has narrowed, and it means just sweat that we have to wipe off. Shifts in stylistic level can also happen, sometimes also referred to as shifts in connotation. So the Old English verb shuvan, from which we get shove, it meant, just, move. But shove has come to be this push, a less dignified verb. Like, don't shove me. That's a negative thing. So worm is a nice example. In Old English, worm meant serpent. And in present day English, it has narrowed, and there has been stylistic shift. Worm is just, a small thing, an earthworm, but worm in Old English referred to these fiery dragons and big serpents that are part of the lore. And so those would be stylistic changes and shifts in connotation. Shifts in denotation means that the dictionary meaning of the word may also change, and we can see interesting connections still in the meaning. So we get present day English word cloud, which are those things up in the sky. In Old English, clod meant rock and hill. So you can see the connection. They're like rocks in the sky, but they have the denotation, the dictionary meaning of the word has changed. So a rock or hill is different from a cloud today. But the word is the same. Clod, cloud, you see a good example of the great vowel shift as well. Old English word dwellan meant to lead into error, to wander, to err. And now in present day English, where do you dwell? It doesn't have the connotations or denotations of an error or wandering. Abstraction and concretization, I believe these are the last ones that we'll cover today. And these just mean that those are two other ways that meanings can change. So the Old English word haven meant a person living or dwelling on heath. Like, those heaths. In, countryside, you have like meadows, heaths, and it has come to mean a heathen, someone who's not a Christian, right? And that is by association that, someone who lives in the middle of nowhere has become to mean a heathen. Maybe too far away from church, right? So those kinds of things may also happen. So this is abstraction, not just referring to a person who lives in a particular geographic place, but to someone who has a certain belief system, or is lacking a belief system, whatever you want to call it. And the opposite process, concretization, the last example here, the Indo-European word for white was albha, and that's where Old English got the word alf, and that's where present-day English got the word elf. Now, white is an abstract thing, and then all of a sudden, no, not all of a sudden, but very gradually, it started to be used for something who has that quality and is more concrete. I don't know how concrete elves are, but here's your example anyway. Okay, so let's move on. I would like to. Yes, I made copies of the Old English text for you, and this is posted also in the same also. It's not posted on the same PowerPoint, but I will post it anyway. So I'm going to turn this off and. Let's practice a little bit of Old English reading. What I have copied for you here is a text from what is called the Peterborough Chronicle. And Peterborough Chronicle this particular text goes back to 1085. So you notice that this is already technically the time of Middle English. It's not Old English anymore. If we take kind of sort of 1100. It's late Old English, and this is from what is called a Doomsday Book, which was commissioned Judgment Day book, but it's associated with, it's just basically a census that William the Conqueror commissioned and ordered his men to go to different places and just, kind of like list these kinds of things. It was a massive census in England. What you owned, where you lived, and who owned you, if that was the case. So they listed every single ox and every single cow and people as well. So it was a massive census, and we have that available now, and that opens up an interesting view into the medieval England, because that's what was done. Now, this kind of a census was resented quite a bit by the people, because they thought that this is just a way of, we are not supposed to be counted. I mean, there's also this connection to the Bible where, you're not supposed to be counting how many people there are, because, you are just like the sand of the sea, you cannot be counted. But by extension from that kind of a history, people did not want to be participating in this census, but they had to because the king said so, and king's men came. And what we have here is the story of it. I want you to read at your leisure, read through the translation of this. It's the cursive, the second lines. In this year, men declared and in truth said that Canute, king of Denmark, King Sweyn's son, set out toward this place and wanted to conquer this land with Earl Roper's help of Flanders and blah blah blah. And then William hears about that, and then he quells that plan, and he starts this census. And people didn't like this because they saw that this is just one step towards very hard taxes and abuse of people who are actually living the country, because you have to get the money from somewhere in order to fund the military. So let's read this. By the way, your reading, I will probably do it. I'm going to open a Zoom session, and you sign up for the Zoom, and when you have done your reading in 10 minutes, it won't take longer, then you exit the session, and then the next person comes in. We'll have a sign up. I'll do it all with email and so on. But anyway, let's practice now. So on visum jare. On visum jare. Men kurodon. And torsotan sadan. Det Knut, kung of Denmarken,
King of
Denmarken, Sveines sunukynges, Sune, sorry, King Sweyn's son, Sveines sunukynges. So what did he do? Fundade Hidervard, and wolde je winnan this land, med rådbärdes erles fultume, with Earl Rodberg's help, of Landran, for than there, that's just because, Knut hävde Rådbärdes dochter, da Wilhelm, Englandes kung, det da var sittande, och Normandie, for de he achte, eider je England, je Normandie, this je aksode. So William heard this, and he was like, he owned England and Normandy. So what did he do? He färde into Englandet. Mit Swamutslan herre. Ridendra man. So with a great army, herre is a word we don't use anymore, but that meant army, with a huge army with of riding men, of horsemen, and foot soldiers, and those foot soldiers were gangendra, going men. So ridendra manna on gangendra. And where did they come from? Of Frankrike, and of Brutlandet. Svanävre är this land negesochte. So never before this country had seen such a big army. And then it continues. I'm sorry if hey, here's one more. Michael, if you didn't have a copy. So page 2. So what happens then? Svaget men wundredon. Hedis land michte. Ealthone here avedan. So people were wondering, how can we feed all these people? How can we support all these people? How can we help them, support them? But is ak in Old English. Akse gung. Let torsufton. Thone here. Jeond eal this land. Tohis mannon. And he feddon thone here. Alch be his landevne. So be is like by according to his proportion of land. And men have done mutsälje swing vas järes. So people had a lot of hardship. Yes, swing, we've lost that nice word of hardship this year. And sekung, let avestan, det land, abutan där like about the sea, so it's quite transparent occasionally, right? That gif his feond, komen upp, that he navdon, na on huam, he fengon svaradliche. Ak da sekung, jakso det och sådan, that his feond gelatte waaron,
that his feond gelatte waaron,
and nemichten,
and nemichten,
na Jefordian,
na Jefordian,
heora afare.
heora
Da let her sum thone here,
salet Jesum von Herre,
faren to heora ahene lande,
faren to heora Armeland,
and sum he held,
and sum held,
on visum lande over winter.
and diesem Lande over winter,
Dato dam midwintre,
Vater dann mit Winter,
was se kung,
Westeken,
on gleawes geastre.
and Leeuwestre,
Gloucester is a quicker way of saying Gleawe geastre. This geastre, it's a Latin-based word, camp. So Gloucester today. Mid his witan,
mid his winter,
and held there his hired,
and held there his head,
fide dahas.
Fide,
Five. Fide.
FIFA,
Fide dahas, that little Roman letter there. On fide dahas. And Sutton the archbishop,
und Sultan der Archbishop,
and Jeharode men, have den synod Theodahas.
have den Synod Theodoras,
Där was Mauritius,
Carlos Mauritius,
je Korento bishope on Lundene,
der Korintobischof an Lundene
und Wilhelm to Norfolke,
und Wilhelm der
and Rodbeard to Chestershire.
und Robert der Chestershire,
He were on ealle des kunges clerikas. After thisum, hafte se kung mutsel getheacht, an suide deo bespace, with his witan, this land, who hit were jeset, of the mid Wiltshon man. Sende da over El England, into Alchereshire, his men, and let ahan ut, who fella hunder huda, actually, hunder huda, whereon innum vare shire, of the wet se kung himself, have the landes, and orves innan vam lande, of the huiltse jerichta, he ahte to habbanne, to 12 of vare shire.
Can you say that one again?
To 12
Yeah. To 12 women. Okay.
and this is of course the dative plural. So to 12 of vare shire. Do you want to finish this? If you need to go, that's fine. But if you have a minute, we can finish this just quickly. Oh, you're welcome to go. So, okay. Eakhelet jevritan, humutselandes, his archbishop as Havdon, and his leodbishopas, and his apodas, and his erlas, and theach ich hit längre tele, För att ofta hur mycket ouch men havde. Det landsittande väs innan Englalande. On lande ove on orve. And hur mycket feos. Hit vare worth. Svasvude nearvelitse. He hitlet ut aspyrian. Det nas an albi. Hidene an jyrdelandes. Nefordon. And then here's the aside from the writer of the Peterborough Chronicle. Hit is sheame totellanne. So it's a shame to tell, it's a shame to count. This has the connection to counting, but tellane also means tell and count. Ak hit ne thuhte him. Nan sheame todonne. So it's a shame to say, but he didn't seem it shameful to do, actually, count all these people, take all this information. An okse ne an ko, ne an swin, nas beluhon, det nas jäsät on his jevrite. And elle tha jevrita väron. Väron je brocht tohim syvän. You are very good. I am amazed. So, but it's Old English is not hard. You know, once you kind of figure out that there's a whole bunch of words that have disappeared from the usage, and meanings have shifted a little bit, but what makes Old English so kind of like close to us is that there are so many of these grammatical words that are actually known, and a lot of content words as well. Well, thank you.